Good morning, everyone. This is going to be a video about a German pastor from Berlin. He died in October 2018, was born in 1953, so he's just a few years older than myself. And he wrote a book in 1995 entitled The Gewatschte Paulus. It's translated here in English, The Fabricated Paul. Subtopic is The Early Christianity in the Twilight. You can purchase it for $13.90 at Amazon in paperback. And this will be part one of the episode because we're just going to give you the key points that he made that I think are important to take away that we can use to help people find Christ again by seeing what the early church thought of Paul, the true church. Now, the original title, while Mr. Detering was still alive, was The Falsified Paul in English, and it was published in the Journal of Higher Criticism in 2003. So my opinion is likely that's what he would have approved as the title in English. But it was first published in German in 1995 as Die Gewatschte Paulus, and so on and so forth, in Dusseldorf. So that title here is not necessarily correctly translated as Fabricated Paul, because why would he have tolerated it being the Falsified Paul? Anyway, so there is the title as it existed. This is a screenshot right out of the Journal of Higher Criticism. Higher Criticism here. It has Robert Eisenman, the author of the Habakkuk Pesher and the Dead Sea Scrolls, the discoverer of the fact that the Ebion, the early church, the Ebionites existed and is recorded right in the Dead Sea Scrolls, particularly in the Habakkuk Pesher, where you have the Zadik, the just one, fighting the spouter of lies, and they're disputing over whether Habakkuk 2 verse 4 says the just shall live by faith, or does it say the just shall live by faithfulness or obedience, or what the word emunah always meant in Hebrew, which was faithfulness towards God, not faith in some facts. And that was a dispute, and it's right there. And Eisenman proved that through scholarships, independent scholarship, that document dates to 50 A.D. It's a post. It's 20 years before the temple is destroyed, and there's a reason for that, because these records were taken from the temple according to the Golb hypothesis, now being confirmed by the University of Israel, that the temple documents were all secreted out through I think it was called Hadrian's Tunnel underneath the temple that went all the way out and drops you off at the Dead Sea. So that's what they were doing, taking the library out, putting them in caves to preserve them. Everybody dies, a million people die there, and nobody comes back and gets the books, and that's why they're lost there forever. Anyway, so he is clearly aware of the modern issues. He's a scholar who dies in 2018. Eisenman has been writing and exposing that issue about the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Ebion, and you'll see how that's going to tie into the key statements I want us to take away today, at least the key summary of what his views are that we take away today. I'll get into a more detailed quotes from him in subsequent episodes. So anyway, let's look at here. So the title of his book was actually Falsified Paul, confirmed in his lifetime while he's alive, 2003. His book in German was in 1995, but he accepted in English the title was Falsified Paul. And I think that's a big difference, because he's using the Clementine homilies and saying they are valid and they falsify Paul. It doesn't mean Paul has been a fabricated individual. See, so there's a different issue. So I think whoever translated this is not following what Detering himself would have approved and did approve as the title. It's just another sub question. So let's continue. All right. So here's the synopsis about Herman Detering's message that I want us to take away from an important fact, which is the Clementine homilies can be trusted in one respect, that when it's talking about Simon Magus, just replace the word Simon Magus with Paul, and then you have the original. Okay, and that's what he's going to say as well. So let's read that. Many scholars since Ferdinand Christian Bauer in the 19th century have concluded that the attacks on Simon Magus in the pseudo-Clementines, it's not really pseudo, except to the extent that we know that a guy named Rufinus in the 380s was a Roman Catholic Church translator, but he would take the original text and throw them away. He would make modifications to make it more palatable to what he called the Latin ear, but basically meant he'd corrupt it to match doctrines of the day. But the issues and the conflicts between Paul and the original apostles could be easily deflected by just simply changing the word Paul to Simon Magus. And that's what Christian Bauer said, and that's what Mr. Detering is reconfirming. And that also is what Eisenman's view as well. So he is, again, I want to reiterate, Detering is a contemporary of Eisenman. He's not from the 18th century. He is from our recent era, and he just died a few years ago, about less than 6 years ago. All right. So let's begin over. I want to repeat this. Many scholars since Ferdinand Christian Bauer in the 19th century have concluded that the attacks on Simon Magus in the 4th century Clementines may be attacks on Paul. Detering takes the attacks of the Clementines as literal and historical and suggests that the attacks of the Clementines are correct in identifying Simon Magus as a proxy for Paul of Tarsus. Detering's argument expands beyond the Clementines to include other apocrypha, meaning other non-canonical works, arguing, such as the Ascent of James, arguing that Simon Magus is sometimes described in apocryphal legends in terms that would fit Paul, though most significantly in the Clementine recognitions and homilies. I'm just going to pause there. Even Roberts, a famous Protestant minister and theologian and translator, translated the Clementine homilies in the early 1900s, and he said, yes, it's obvious that these 8 times that he references 8 times, it's very clear that the underlying person who's really the object of the attack is not a person named Simon Magus, but none other than Paul. Let's continue. Detering contends that the common source of these documents may be as early as the 1st century in a polemic against Paul. 1st century means anything prior to 99 AD or 99 AD or earlier. We're talking about the early church period, emanating from the Jewish side of Christianity, which again is the early church. Having thus identified Paul with Simon Magus, Detering argues that Simon Magus's visit to Rome in the Clementines had no other basis than being an account of Paul's presence there, and further that the tradition of Peter's residence in Rome rests on the assumed necessity of his resisting the archenemy of Judaism, meaning Paul, there as elsewhere. Thus, according to Detering, the idea of a Peter at Rome originated with the Ebionites. Okay, that's consistent with what Eisenman had said in his commentary on the Habakkuk Pesher. But it was afterwards taken up by the Catholic Church, and then Paul was associated with Peter in opposition to Simon Magus. So now later tradition or later myths said, Paul is an enemy of Simon Magus. And he's saying, then he's going to say the irony is originally Simon Magus was Paul himself in the early church writings. So the Catholicism tried to deflect the passages by making Paul in even subsequent documents appear to be an enemy of Simon Magus when in fact he is who Simon Magus was in the original Clementines when you translate it back to what it originally said. All right. Now, I'm not going to go into further quotes of Mr. Detering, but stick around. I want to just give you some background on him and where you can learn more about him. First of all, you can learn more about him by going to his website, which is still active, even though he died in 2018. It's called Herman, 2 N's, Detering.de/Vita. You'll see his life, and you have all these things. And if you want to actually read this, it's difficult to read German, right? So just take this over and take this web link and go to Firefox. They have a new tool that will pop up, and then you just press it, and it will translate the page very effectively into English. So on that page, I found all of his publications listed and the translation that they gave for the article or the German work of 1995 in German that was translated into English is the fake Paul. Again, I think it's the falsified Paul, meaning the Paul that we know of was falsified by the Clementine homilies, and therefore he's false, not fake per se. So it's not the best translation, I would say. Anyway, so this is where you can learn more about the background of Herman Detering. Also, here you learn his biography better than on the Wikipedia page. Totally better. Here's his background. Dr. Herman Detering was born in 1953 in Oldenburg. He is a Protestant theologian. He's married, has 4 children. After graduating from high school, German studies, classical philology, and theology in West Berlin, scientific assistant. I guess this is written more like a resume, I guess. So he's he went and had German studies, classical philology, and theology in West Berlin. He was a scientific assistant as well. From 1992 to 2009, he was a parish priest in Berlin. He lives in Altmark today. So this is while he was still alive. So he's not. I guess after you're dead, it's hard to update your webpage. So it's left the way he left it. And he had a doctorate in 1991. The topic of his dissertation was the Dutch radical criticism. Doctoral supervisor was Professor Walter Schmithals. So he's a definite theologian, definite scholar, PhD. To have a doctorate means you've received a PhD. You've done in-depth study, book quality, and he has done numerous books as well. And this is one of them. English work, just want to make a reference to Paul, Mark, and Other Substitutions, Richard Carrier on the Fabricated Paul by Dr. Herman Detering, edited and translated by Renee Salm. And apparently had a disagreement with Mr. Carrier. Let us call a spade a spade. Carrier may be an expert on the natural philosophers of the early Roman Empire, but he is certainly not an expert on Paul, Herman Detering. So he believes, Mr. Detering does, that he is an expert on Paul, and therefore others who venture into his realm are venturing into the area that they may not know as much as he did. Okay, then I just want to talk to you about purchasing the book or acquiring it if you're interested. Is at Amazon, it's $13.90, but that's the only format it's available now. But now I tried to find if there was a version in ebook that you could purchase because I bought the ebook. I'll show you in a second. And I wanted to give you the price, but I can't because it will not tell me that. So you ask Amazon to show you all formats, and it still shows you only the paperback. But I can show you here. Here's my Kindle inbox, if you will, and it shows Fabricated Paul is definitely something they had just recently as an ebook. So maybe what it is the minute you purchase an ebook, they turn it off so you no longer see it. So don't assume that you can't acquire by an ebook, and I'm sure it's far less than the $13 that it costs to buy a physical book. Okay, so that's going to bring it into part one. In the next part, I'll go through starting to read portions of the book entitled The Fabricated Paul. That's the paperback and the ebook. So we'll pick it up in the next episode, and you'll find him very interesting. God bless. Take care. Ciao. Bye.